So welcome guys, welcome to Vijayawada India Developer Group, and we are with Gaurav Ketripal sir. To be honest, I'm a little bit tense to have the senior campaigner like him. And we are coming up with an initiative called Demystify SF Products. So the name itself tells you that we are going to demystify almost all the Salesforce products in our Vijayawada sessions, which is going to be happen every Sunday at 11 a.m. So the we want to inaugurate this unique initiative with Gaurav sir. We were planning this for a long time, and with his due respect, he accepted our invitation, and he was more than excited than us. And here we are with the session. Uh, we are having a simple agenda, guys. So at 11 a.m. we had this welcome keynote, and 11:10 we will be demystifying Commerce Cloud, the most I can say the one of the difficult, not the one of the most difficult Salesforce cloud product is Commerce Cloud, and it can be demystified only with one person, which is none other than Gaurav Ketripal. And we'll be having a good Q&A session after the good 1 hour session of Gaurav sir. And Vijay will be having some fun facts after the Q&A, and wait for that. And by 12:30 we are going to close this. Yeah, here we are having our Gaurav Ketripal sir, and he is very, very well known for his certifications. He is 31x certified. He is a Salesforce MVP. I can say 5x Salesforce MVP. Sorry for not mentioning that. And he's Einstein champion, Einstein AI champion. My favorite product, Einstein. I have to ask more questions on Einstein today to Gaurav sir, and he is also CTO of MTX Group, proud employee of MTX. And you can follow Gaurav sir at the rate of Gaurav Ketripal at Twitter. He is very much active in Twitter, and he has his eyes on everyone. So whatever he do in the ecosystem or community, he always taps and backs it. So this is Gaurav Ketripal sir. Thank you, Gaurav Ketripal sir, for accepting our invitation and joining the session. So it's all yours, sir.
Thank you for that kind introduction. I'll just start sharing my screen. I see that there are a few people in the waiting room, so if you can just
Yes, sir. I am just
hearing that. Okay. I think this happens to me at least twice or thrice every day, that people have to remind me I'm on mute, because I think the reality is that we have so many calls and everything being virtual. This is what people call as the new normal. I call this as the new abnormal, and I really want things to go back to what we were used to calling as the normal. I think back then we thought it was boring, but now I think we all realize the true value of those small little pleasures of life that we had. All right, so without further ado, I'll just take this forward. So good morning and welcome everyone to this session on demystifying Commerce Cloud. Here is an agenda of what we'll cover over the next 1 hour. If you have attended any of the past sessions that I've presented on this topic, some of it will be repetitive, but I'll try and add some new aspects to it, so that you go back with some new learnings today. There's something which is obviously completely new, which has gone recently GA, which is API first commerce. So this is probably the first session where I'll talk about it, and I really did not get enough time to prepare slides, so I picked up a couple of slides from one of the Salesforce workshops that was there. But we'll start off with a quick introduction. We'll try and talk about the differences between B2B and B2C. We'll talk about how the architecture of the product has evolved, how it started off with something called a site genesis, focused on an MVC architecture, went to a mobile first architecture, moved to a new architecture called SFRA, and I'll kind of demystify all these terms as we go along. And then finally, towards the end, we will do a demo of site genesis, SFRA, and then we'll do a quick recap, and we'll follow it up with questions and answers. And we'll see if time permits. I have a short quiz on this as well. Again, it's a quiz which I had prepared for an earlier session. If you were on that session, you might actually win because you might know the answers, but we'll see if time permits, then we'll try and do that. So first of all, thank you. I think it's a Sunday morning, and 11 a.m. on a Sunday morning is still early by my kids' standards, because I had to wake them up and get them ready because I told them I have a webinar. Uh, so thank you for taking time to learn on a Sunday, learn something new. As I said earlier as well, I think this situation due to COVID-19, although it has affected us in many ways, we cannot go out, we cannot eat out, we cannot watch movies. But I think if there's one silver lining out of this all is that we all have more time on our hands. So if you want to read, you have time to read. If you want to watch Netflix, you have time to watch Netflix. If you want to learn, then you have a lot of time to learn. So thank you for prioritizing learning today over everything else, at least for this next couple of hours. And then thank you to Sesha and to the Vijayawada group. I know you have been asking me since last year. I think you did an event where you wanted me to come, and unfortunately I could not make that happen. And I think Vijayawada group is amongst the youngest developer groups in India, for those who are not really from that group. And I think it's also it's also a pleasant surprise. It's actually one of the most active groups. I think you have done a number of events, and I don't think that just that number itself speaks to the quality of a group, but again, the quality of sessions that you have had, a session around developer to consultant mindset, a session with Roshan around integration. And I think you have, because of that, all that good work that you've been doing, you have got some really good support from Salesforce, from Vishwa, from Kiran. So thank you for inviting me, and keep up all the good work. And I'm sure that this group will continue to evolve and continue to contribute to the India community. Okay, so before we start, again, I kind of put images like this in almost all my presentations. Not really the same, but the idea is that virtual sessions are hard. I don't know what you're doing in parallel. Some of you might be having breakfast. Some of you might be lying down on your bed and listening to me. So I do want to make sure that you are all attentive, and you understand the gist of what I'll be conveying over the next 1 year. The expectation is not that you will walk out of this Zoom session becoming a Commerce Cloud expert. If anybody claims anything like that, they're obviously not being honest. The expectation is that you can actually speak fluent Commerce Cloud language, you can understand the key concepts, and then I hope to cultivate some seeds in you that if you want to really go the distance and learn Commerce Cloud and get certified and do projects on it, then you have those right inputs which will help you at a later stage. At the same time, I do want to make sure that if you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat window, and I'll take all the questions towards the end. And as I always say, there are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. So anything that comes to your mind, please go ahead and add it in the chat, and we'll take them in the end. Okay, so just a quick introduction about myself. I've been in the ecosystem since 2007. My wife calls it I've been married to Salesforce since 2007. I've been fortunate to have a very rewarding career in the ecosystem. I became an MVP. I became an MVP in 2016. I have been a certified technical instructor, and then AI is one of my personal passions, and I was very fortunate to become an Einstein champion when the program launched. Again, one of the advantages of being around is I've been able to do a number of certifications in the time that, and being able to work on those multiple cloud offerings has obviously helped. And I work as a CTO at MTX, which is a Salesforce and MuleSoft partner. Who's in the audience? I think some of you may be students, because I think a lot of, from what I've heard, is a lot of people in this group are students. But a quick poll, and again, this is something which I had prepared earlier. How many of you are developers? If you can just type it out in the chat, and I'll see if I can. You can write dev, D, developers, whatever you want in the chat. Okay. Developers are typically people who always say it's not a bug, it's a feature. And again, that's one way of defending yourself. And again, it's a constant fight between developers and QAs as to what is a bug and what is a feature. Any designers in the house? So the reason I mentioned this here is in Commerce Cloud, and as well as pretty much any web application that you develop, the front end or the design aspect of it is very, very crucial. So good to see a designer in the house. It's mostly dominated by designers. Designers are people who always talk in terms of styles and Photoshop and Sketch and style sheets. And so here is an example of a style. The style is obese, the width is 200%, and the overflow is visible. And this is my style during the lockdown. Sesha was actually talking about how people remain fit in this lockdown period. So I'm clearly not I'm clearly an anti-pattern as far as fitness is concerned, at least for the lockdown. And then administrators, project managers, BAs, QAs. These are people who you need to make sure that they are happy, because if they are not happy, then the client is not happy, and then your project in turn will not be successful. All right, so moving on, let's actually do an introduction to Commerce Cloud. And in fact, let's do an introduction to e-commerce in general. So this is some statistics which I presented at in a session at Dreamforce. And again, this kind of talks about how e-commerce has gone from strength to strength in the last few years. And in fact, I was reading yesterday night that Amazon has just posted its quarterly results, and those results are its all-time best results of any quarter since Amazon has been in existence. And that has all happened when people were locked down in their houses. So you can just imagine as to how powerful e-commerce has become. Even if you cannot go out of your houses, e-commerce is there pretty much for all your needs for things that you need to buy. So some statistics in terms of how it has evolved. 50% of e-commerce transactions are done through smartphones. There's 100% annual growth in social commerce. What this means is you looked up a product either on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or any other social channel, and then you decided to buy that product. And then more than 50% of the in-store sales are influenced by digital, which means that even if you decide to buy something from a store, you had probably looked up that product earlier, either on the website, either through an app, or some digital medium. So even if it's in store, it's definitely influenced by digital in some capacity or the other. And then the last one, 25% purchases span multiple touch points, which means if you are making a transaction from another device, there is a good chance that you actually saw this product or service through another device. So you probably saw it on your desktop, but you took some time and then you finally made the obvious difference between B2C and B2B is that B2C, as a seller, you are selling directly to the end customers. And then B2B, you are actually selling to some other entities which are like distributors or dealers, and they in turn are selling to the end customers. Okay, so for this session, we'll focus mostly on B2C commerce. I'll give a little bit of an introduction to B2B commerce, but we'll not go into too much detail. So when we say Commerce Cloud, it's important to understand what that means. Commerce Cloud is a term which encompasses both B2C and B2B. Originally, it meant B2C commerce, which was then called as Salesforce Commerce Cloud, also called as SFCC. But then Salesforce acquired another company called Cloudways, which was more of a B2B play. And because of that, they had to rename both the products. So Demandware or SFCC then became B2C commerce, and Cloudways then became a product called B2B commerce. So let's look at the overall architecture of Commerce Cloud. At the bottom layer, you have what we call as the platform operations layer. And this is typically common to all the products, whether that's marketing cloud, whether that's service cloud, whether that's sales cloud. So you have key concepts like security, multi-tenancy, framework, and global release model. Sesha, I do want to ask some questions to the audience. So is it possible that I can unmute them, or do we still have some distractions around?
Yes, sir, you can.
Okay, so first question. Can anyone answer for me, what does a multi-tenant architecture mean? Anybody? Feel free to unmute yourself and then answer it.
We can use for the limitation of the Salesforce. That's why we can use the sales, Sybase Cloud, Computing, Commerce.
It can be typically compared to a society, number of flats. So resources are limited, say water supply or electricity supply. So that is what I understood in a simple analogy of multi-tenant architecture for Salesforce.
Hello, hi Gaurav sir. I'm Naveen from Vijayawada. Multi-tenant means it's like an apartment, like a group of people occupied their place, and everyone have an individual security. They can walk around it, but like how we occupied with in an apartment like that, everyone have blocks.
That's correct. So yeah, I think most of you answered it right. Multi-tenancy essentially means that there are a number of shared resources and you all are tenants, which means basically you all share those resources. And then there is something called a global release model, which I'm sure all of you know. So can anyone tell me what is the global release model of Salesforce?
Hello. Salesforce release 3 times, like it's an agile model. Every year it's released 3 times. Like usually if you take any software, it's updated based upon their requirement. But it's a Salesforce, like it's a functioning through agile model. Every 3 times, every year 3 times it's got updated.
Yeah. So yeah, spring, summer, and winter releases 3 times a year. So on top of this platform operations layer, we have what we call as a retail data model. And as you could guess, I mean, for Commerce Cloud, for a retail data model, you would have things like order, inventory, products, price, customers, and several other things. Then we have a layer of Commerce Cloud Einstein, which is the AI layer, which has been integrated with Commerce Cloud. It currently has 2 features. One is product recommendations and the other one is predictive email. Product recommendations is basically looking at your past buying history, or just by looking at the products that you have purchased. So just by looking at your past purchasing history, or just by looking at the products that you have been looking at, Einstein is able to actually recommend what products you are likely to buy in future. So it makes those recommendations. Predictive email is again similar, based on the kind of products that you have either looked at the store or based on the products that you have bought in the past. There could be an integration with Marketing Cloud. So you get an email that these are some of the products which have a good discount right now, and these are some similar to the products that you have bought in the past. So could you be interested? And again, these solutions are for store as well as for digital. And on top of it, there is an integration layer, which is via APIs. In Commerce Cloud earlier, we had something called Open Commerce API, or OCAPI. Now we have something called as an API first commerce, as I mentioned in the intro as well. That's something which I'm actually going to talk about for the first time. It's very new. It went GA last month. And again, there are not a lot of learning resources around that. And on top of that, we have all these touch points. So you have the various ways in which you can place an order, whether that's through an iPhone, iPad, Android phone. You can walk into a store, you can use a tablet, you can use a desktop, you can call a call center, you can use a kiosk, and then there are multiple other ways of doing that. So let's talk about the physical architecture of Commerce Cloud. The way it's architected is very similar to the way Salesforce is architected. So similar to Salesforce, we have a number of data centers spread all over the world. Then we have these data centers segregated into something which we call as pods. These are referred to as points of deliveries. In very simplistic terms, you can say that these are racks of servers which are stacked together in a single location. So, for example, there could be a pod in Europe, there could be a pod in America, there could be a pod in Australia. That's how the Salesforce, that's how the Commerce Cloud data center is now global. So, based on what I've told you regarding what a pod is, can anyone tell me what would be an equivalent term in Salesforce for what a pod is in Commerce Cloud? What would be an equivalent term to a point of delivery in Salesforce? Anyone wants to answer? So I gave you an example. There could be a pod in Europe, there could be a pod in North America, there could be a pod in Asia, and similar concepts you have in Salesforce as well. What is it called in Salesforce?
Databases.
It's not database.
There are answers from the chart window as instance.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah. So whoever answered it as instance, that is correct. So you have NA1 instance, you have EU03, and you have a number of instances. So those pods are then split up into what we call as realms. A realm is basically a logical segregation, and it's your logical segregation of the Commerce Cloud environment. So essentially, it has all the resources that only you can access, nobody else can access that. Going back that definition of realm, can anyone tell me what is an equivalent of a realm in Salesforce? It's again the logical segregation of Salesforce that only you can use, nobody else can use. Or that's correct. So it's essentially an org that you have access to it, and all the resources within that org are for you, not for other users. And then these realms are split up into what we call as two instance groups, a primary instance group and a secondary instance group. In the primary instance group, we have three instances, development, staging, and production. Production is obviously where you make all the code changes live, right? No, you don't do that. So production is something that you never touch directly. Production is the live environment where the customer is actually using your applications. Staging is where typically you do all the data enrichments. Development, this is kind of a misnomer because although it says development, it is actually used for user acceptance testing and QA. And then we have sandboxes, which by default, we have 5 sandboxes. And the idea is that you as developers use these sandboxes. You push out your changes to staging where data enrichment is done. These changes are then propagated to development where the UAT happens, and once everything is green, then you push it out to production where the end users can start using it. So there is some difference in sandboxes and the primary instance group instances, which is that it has a lower memory footprint, it has a lower CPU, and then these are typically what you use as developers. And somewhere at the bottom, you would also have a source control layer which could be Bitbucket, which could be GitHub, which could be CVS, TFS, from where your developers would be checking out changes and there will be committing their changes to that repository. And then they would be running those changes on their sandboxes and then pushing them out to the primary instance group instances. Okay, another change that has happened, and again, just to take you back in time when the very early days, it was called Intershop. Then it was rebranded as Demandware. And that's when the Salesforce acquired this company and they rebranded it as Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Since then, it has gone a massive evolution. The architecture has completely changed to what they called as a mobile first approach. So the idea was that there are more smartphones on planet Earth than there are tablets. There are more tablets than there are laptops, and there are more laptops than there are desktops. So this kind of explains why there was a need for a mobile first architecture. Back in the days when I was doing mobile development, this is very early 2011, 2012, even before than that. And then the operating systems that were popular were Qt, BlackBerry, and then all the other Symbian. All those OSs are now kind of extinct. Now it's kind of a 2-horse race between iOS and Android. And at that time, you were building products. Mobile was more of a luxury to build because not many people were using it. But now it's completely changed, and you need to actually build products with a mobile first mindset, or else it will not be successful. And that is true for Commerce Cloud as well. And that's the reason why they pivoted to a new architecture. Again, some statistics which kind of justify why a mobile first approach is needed. More than half of the people would not recommend a business with a bad mobile site. Almost 40% would turn to a competitor after having a bad mobile experience, and 23% people would use adjectives which I cannot use on a public forum. And we've all done that. I mean, when we go to a site or an app which is not working, we start cursing our phone and we try and look for a better option. Okay, so with that context, let me introduce you to Site Genesis, which is the architecture, the legacy MVC architecture that Commerce Cloud had. Can someone explain me what MVC is? And please don't tell me what M stands for, what V stands for, what C stands for. But if someone can actually tell me what MVC means, what each of those layer means, you can unmute yourself and talk about it. I'll take a quick water break by then. Yeah, go ahead. Nobody knows what
Hello?
MVC. Yeah, go on.
Hello, sir. It separates the three components like what the user sees the data is different from how the data is saved in backend, how the data will be updated. These logics are different and this will be separated using architecture.
Great. Thank you, Sailila. Great answer. Anybody else who wants to improve on that answer?
Yeah, this is Vivek here.
Hi, Gaurav.
Yeah, Vivek, go ahead.
So it's kind of a distributed architecture where, for example, in a bigger team, people work on different things. Some may be working on the UI layer, some may be working on the data layer, and some is working on the logic that controls how data flows from backend to the front end. So it's basically a modularization where the different modules are kept separate, which comes together to form a business layer together. But it is basically distributed architecture where logically separate things are kept separate from each other, and where different teams can work and they don't impact each other when we are working on one of those things.
Yeah, thank you, Vivek. Asif, I saw you unmuted yourself. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell you it contains three things like the model which deals with the database, and view where we show the data on UI, and the third one controller means it extract data, means it.
Yeah, great answer. Yeah, thank you. I think I'm really happy that all of you remember your MVC concepts, especially on a Sunday morning. So the problem with the Site Genesis was that although it was architected with a MVC architecture, but there were several loopholes in that architecture. So on the view layer, we use something called ISML, which stands for Internet Store Markup Language. And then the idea there was that it was a templating framework and it would generate HTML at runtime. Although that intention was correct, there were a lot of performance issues with the way that these ISMLs rendered. So that was one of the problems. And then second problem was that models did not actually represent the data. So in a pure MVC architecture, the models should abstract the data layer and do nothing else. That was not possible because in Site Genesis, we also had a concept of demandware scripts, which was kind of diluting the overall MVC architecture. And then most importantly, the problem was there was no separation of concerns. So although there were best practices laid out in terms of this is how you design your views, this is how you create your models, this is what your controller should do, but there were ways to bypass that architecture. And as developers, I mean, we always try and take the shortest route possible. And then that's something which is not really scalable in the long run. So there were some big problems with the MVC architecture inside Genesis, and that's why Salesforce had to come up with a new architecture, and I'll come to that in a little bit. As I said, one of the problems was there on the view layer that we had templates, but those templates were bulky. There was a templating framework called ISML, Internet Store Markup Language. Can anyone tell me what is a templating framework, and can you give me some examples of templating frameworks that you're aware of? These are typically used at the view layer. Anybody who wants to answer, you can type it out in the chat, or you can. LWC and JS, these are not templating frameworks. Angular is not a templating framework either. J2E is not a templating framework either, and neither is Node.js. Aura is not a templating framework either. Anybody knows of a templating framework? Any frameworks you've heard of? So the idea of a templating framework is that you essentially do not write HTML. You write templates at the view layer, and that then at runtime, those templates get converted into something that we call as dynamic HTML. So with that definition, does anyone want to tell me what a templating framework is? Yeah, I think somebody finally answered it right. It's Django. Yeah. So Django is an example, Handlebars is an example, and then there are several other templating frameworks. Whatever else that you have mentioned, pretty much these are front-end frameworks, but these are not really exclusively templating frameworks. Okay, so this is what a Site Genesis site looked like. On the desktop, it obviously looks beautiful. It gives a first-class citizen experience, but there were a lot of problems when you ran these sites on a phone or on a tablet. So because of that, Salesforce decided to come up with a new architecture called SFRA, which stands for Storefront Reference Architecture. Originally, this was actually called as MFRA, which stood for Mobile First Reference Architecture. The intent behind that name was it was a mobile first design. And then it reflected well in the fact that this would run well on smartphones and tablets. But there was a problem with the MFRA naming convention, in the sense that people thought that this is mostly aimed at mobile and tablets and not at the desktop. So they had to rename it again and call it Storefront Reference Architecture, which is a much more generic name. And storefront in e-commerce terminology means an e-commerce website. So from an architecture perspective, there were only a few things that changed. At the bottom, you again had this trust platform with core concepts of multi-tenancy, scalability, certified security, and high SLA in terms of reliability. What they really changed is a lot of things on the view layer as well as the API layer. So now it was a mobile first user experience, and it gave you a first-class citizen experience, whether you are on a tablet or a computer or a phone or any other device. So how they did that was they collected best practices from over 2,000 customer stores, and then based on that, they created this framework called SFRA. The intent was twofold, that there should be rapid customization. So you should be able to quickly iterate. There's a terminology that we use in mobile development as well as e-commerce, is fail early and fail fast, which essentially means that if you need to try things out, in the sense that whether they are working or not, just quickly get them out of the way, so that you know exactly what you want and what would click with your users. And then the second was seamless update. So when you make changes or when you roll out a new version, that should be seamless and a completely oblivious experience to your end users. So they should not really have to go through a painful process that v1.0 was something like this, v2.0 is something like this, and when v3.0 comes out, it would be a completely different experience altogether. So in terms of an MVC architecture, again, they kind of fixed the loopholes. Instead of having just controllers and scripts, they introduced a concept of modules and super modules. And then views became generic models for a pure abstraction of the data layer. And in that sense, it was more of a pure MVC architecture. Now, this is what a SFRA site looks like. And again, I'll show you a quick demo of this in some time. Now, let's talk a little bit about API first commerce, or this is also a term which is called headless commerce. And as I said, it is fairly new in the sense that this has actually gone GA last month. And if you are working for a Salesforce partner, they have been running some workshops around this. I was very fortunate to attend the very first workshop, and from that, I kind of pulled in a couple of slides which explain what the paradigm shift is from SFRA or the mobile first commerce to API first commerce. So typically what you see on the left is how we have been building e-commerce sites on Commerce Cloud so far. So you have all these templates. You use tools like Page Designer, which is basically a drag and drop similar to a page builder that you have in Salesforce. And you used SFRA and you built all these sites, which had a very strong visual component to it. Okay. Now the problem that has been happening for the last couple of years is a lot of companies or a lot of customers, they want a diverse stack. So they don't want to do everything on Salesforce, or they don't want everything on Magento or SAP Hybris, and they want a diverse stack. So maybe I want to use inventory management from one solution. I want to use payment gateways from another solution. That was still possible with SFRA, with using an integration layer called Okapi, but it has a lot of restrictions. So what they decided to do was they decided to completely transform this experience and build what is called a headless commerce. So when we say headless commerce, what it essentially means is you are building pretty much everything that you need apart from the head. So in the body, your head is kind of your front end and everything else is the back end. So you're building everything else, which is apart from the head in Commerce Cloud, and on the head, you can pretty much attach any front end that you want. You can build it in React, you can build it in Angular, you can build it in Vue.js, or you can build it on a CMS platform. So it's really entirely up to you. What this means is there is a new digital experience layer. What that does is it kind of separates out your view layer and segregates what all you actually do behind the hood. So behind the hood, you have all these functionalities. You have your data model, which consists of a catalog. And then you have all these managers, which are basically your controllers and modules like cart manager, a promotion engine. And then there is a lot of things which is being done. And it is all abstracted via these APIs and all these front end, in fact, now call these APIs rather than directly accessing any of these controllers. And this, the beauty of this is it opens up your architecture to new possibilities. Like you can actually build your commerce head or a front end on a Heroku application. You can host it pretty much anywhere else without any further dependencies. And then on the left, it also shows some of the front ends that are now possible. You can actually have it on phones, on tablets. You can actually gamify, use things like Apple TV. You can also give a e-commerce experience on now what is called a connected car or a connected refrigerator as well. So with that, let me actually show you a little bit about what an e-commerce or what a commerce cloud environment really looks like. So let me log in, and then I'll actually walk you through the process about the sandbox as well when we come to the questions. But for now, let me just, so this is similar to how you navigate your Salesforce org. It's just that the user interface is completely different. So this interface, when I log in, this is what we call as the business manager interface, or also called as a BM. And anytime I log in, it actually shows me that there is a new release, or there is a new release that is coming up, and this is some of the new features in that release. So it says that coming soon in Salesforce B2C Commerce release 20.3. The versioning here of releases is a little bit different. So instead of summer 20, spring 20, and winter 20, and the convention is a little different. So this is actually 20 stands for the year, which is 2020, an year which nobody will forget thanks to coronavirus. And .3 actually stands for the month. So this is a sandbox that I have, which is still running on the March release. I have not really updated it to a later release, but what Commerce Cloud does is they follow a different release cycle. So there is a major release every month, and that is how your releases come. So if this was 20.8, this would be the August release for 2020. And if it was 20.8.1, this would basically be the first minor release in the August release. Okay, so I'll just skip this for now. On the top left, you'll see that I have an option to select a site. So if you could actually host multiple e-commerce sites on your sandbox. And right now I have 2 sites which are sample sites which are provided by SFRA. I'll just click RefArc. And then I'll click on Storefront, which will basically show me what this site looks like to an end customer. Pardon me, I have a little bit of a cold today. So once this loads, this will show us what this site would look like to an end customer. Initially, we get a consent pop-up thanks to GDPR, where we basically tell the user that this site will store cookies and we want them to either accept that or deny that. And then this site loads. So this is similar to what you see on most e-commerce sites. You have some categories, you have a top level navigation, and then you have a top bar as well with some icons. Okay, and then you can see some featured products, and then you have a footer. So let me actually show you how this navigation works. So let me go to a category like men's clothing, and since I'm not really going out, let me shop for shorts. So when I come to this page where I see a list of all these products, this is something which in e-commerce terminology we call as a product listing page, because what it does, it shows me a listing of products, and I can view thumbnail images of those products. I can view the prices, I can view the star ratings, and on the left I can actually do some search refinement. So I can look at some specific colors that I want. I really want a black short. I can select a size, I can select a price, and I can do a bunch of things. Then suppose I've zeroed down on a product which I want to buy. I can click on that product, and it takes me to another page which we call as the product detail page, because what is this page showing? It is showing me all the details of this product. So it is a description, there are some details, there are some images of this product, and then there is a bunch of other information. I can select a size, I can select the quantity, and I can add it to my cart. As soon as I do that, you'll see that there is this bubble count changes here, and then my cart has this product. At this point of time, I can go and check out. So you'll notice that I did not log into this portal. So right now I am doing what is called as a guest checkout, and most portals allow this for users who really don't want to sign up. They like to do a one-time purchase and just be done with it. Or I can sign up and then I can log in to this particular portal. What I can also do is, if I click on this icon, it will take me back to the home page. Rather than navigating and searching for products, I can actually search for products from the search bar as well. So for example, I want a laptop bag. If I say that, I can actually go to the directly go to that particular product page as well. Okay, and then few other things. Cart, I've already shown it to you. Let me actually show you how this would look like on a phone or a tablet. So let me pick iPhone X. So if I go to the home page, you'll see that it renders very well. Everything is kind of tiled and stacked vertically. If I go to a product detail page, again, now I have a carousel for images, just what I would expect on a phone. And then look at how these drop downs have changed as well. So that's another change, which is thanks to mobile, and then I can add the product to my cart as well. Similarly, if I change it to an iPad, again, you'll see that it's a very responsive experience, and I don't really feel like that this is a site which is not optimized for my current device. Okay, so this is all from an end user perspective, but if you want to see what Commerce Cloud developers typically have to do, so one of the things that they end up doing a lot of the time is debugging their sites. So for that, we have something called a storefront toolkit. If you look at this icon on the top left, if you click on this, it shows you some options. So it shows you all these options. So if you look at this particular page, and again, I'll ask a question here. If you look at this page, and if I scroll down here, and if I then go to another page, which is, let's say, outfits. Or let me go to another one. Televisions. Can someone confirm if they can still hear me? Because I just want to make sure I am not having any internet issues. Okay, it's working.
Yep.
So some part of the page has changed. and some part of the page has not changed when I navigate it. And again, if I go to a product detail, you'll see that some part of the page will change. Sesha, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, sir.
Sir, we can hear you.
We can hear you and see you very well.
So what I'll do is I'll actually turn off my video for now because I'm getting a prompt that my internet connection is not that great. Okay, so if you look at this particular page, again, there is something that has changed on this page, and some parts of the page are still the same. Can anyone tell me, when I navigated from the home page to the listing page to the detail page, what parts of the page did not change?
Taskbar, Sahaj Desai.
Yeah,
The
so
top part, the
Header
breadcrumbs.
part. Header part.
Header bar.
Exactly, exactly. So thank you everybody who answered. I think good to see that everybody is paying attention. So the header bar, the navigation, and the footer bar did not change. And the idea there is that since these are basically pages, or these are sections of pages which are constant, you actually want to, the way you would structure this page if you were writing plain HTML is, you would write a separate HTML for header, for footer, and you'll write a separate HTML, which would probably be a template, which would generate HTML dynamically depending on the content, and this would be separate. So if I want to look at how this page is structured, what I will do is, let me go back to the home page, and I will click on this content information. Once I do that, and I scroll over some parts of this page, you will see that it is actually now telling me that this particular product, I can go and edit that in the business manager. There is a content slot. Some of these are advanced concepts, but what I really want to tell you is that there are tools which enable you to see what content is being served from there. Similarly, if I click on page information, you will see that this changes based on whether I am on the top bar, whether I am on the carousel, or whether I am on certain section of a page. So everything is being rendered as a template and being called from a controller. So in that sense, we are still maintaining that pure MVC architecture that I earlier talked about. Okay, and then on the footer, again, it's something which is very different. There are some other things that you can see here. You can actually see what parts of the page are cached as well. So in any web application, it's always a good idea to cache static content because that helps you save resources. And then as your user load increases, you need to cache resources, because otherwise, if all the users are requesting the same resources that never really change, it hits your overall site performance really bad. So you'll see these small icons that have popped up, and it shows me that this particular page is cached till this duration. Some parts of the page are not cached. Again, there are some rules that you can define as to what sections of the page should be cached, what sections of the page should not be cached. And if I come to, for example, cart, it says that this particular section of the page is not cached. Can anyone tell me why it's a bad idea to cache the cart? You can type it out, or you can unmute yourself and answer. Why we should not be caching the cart?
From the cart, we can remove the product and we can add the product under runtime. So
that's a good answer.
Customer decision, based on the customer decision, we can add and we can remove. So it is not a permanent.
Yes. Yeah, that's correct. So the cart is basically something that the customer can change at any point of time. So imagine that you just added 100 products to your cart just to see what the bill looks like, and the platform cached it, and then you ordered it for cash on delivery, and then you have to pay a huge bill. So again, another good answer that I see is that whatever you have in your cart is actually PII, personally identifiable information. So that is, again, legally you should not be caching that. A lot of countries have rules around that, that if you cache those, that it's a legal offense as well. Okay, so with that, let me actually go back to my slides. So the question really comes to this is that how do you learn Commerce Cloud? Again, one of the reasons I do these sessions week after week and month after month is as compared to a service cloud, a sales cloud, or a marketing cloud, the entry barrier in Commerce Cloud is unfortunately very high. And it's very high because of several reasons. A, it's not easy to get a sandbox. B, even if you have a sandbox, there are very limited public resources or tutorials that you can actually refer to. So how do you really overcome these barriers, and how do you learn Commerce Cloud? So before I come to that, I mean, there are a lot of case studies around Commerce Cloud of some customers which have been really successful. A lot of these are brands which are from US and European regions, so you may not identify with them, but Puma, Adidas, Disney, these are all brands that we in India identify with as well. So these are all built on Commerce Cloud. And now let's talk about the learning part. How do you learn Commerce Cloud and what does it lead to? So again, I included details of B2B commerce here as well, just so that you know that these credentials exist. And for one more reason, that again, I can quote Salesforce official statistics from what I've seen, is that these are 4 of the most difficult certifications in the Salesforce world. Again, the reasons for that are several fold. The entry barriers I mentioned. You need a sandbox to practice. If you don't get a sandbox, it's obviously very difficult to get certified. You need some learning resources to practice. Again, that's a gap which has existed for long, but thankfully it's now being corrected. You did not have that in the past. And then most importantly is that you need to be aware of the concepts, and you need to practice to pass these exams. You will not find dumps for these. Even if you find dumps for these, the accreditation team for B2B and B2C, they work very actively. I've been very fortunate to actually contribute questions and flag some resources which are not appropriate. So the idea is that these are accreditations and certifications that you need to earn, and it's worth it, because B2C commerce, especially if you become a B2C commerce developer and you become a B2C commerce architect, there are very few of these. In fact, less than 100 of these B2C certified commerce architects all over the world, and it's like the pinnacle of success that you can get in the Salesforce e-commerce world. So now you have what we call as a Commerce Cloud Developer Center, which is basically an open site. Earlier, there was this site, developer.commercecloud.com. This is an open site which has pretty much all the documentation that you need, at least for the developer exam. So you have information around the APIs, what sort of APIs exist. You can actually try out these APIs. It's in a very simple interface, which you're used to, like in an open API format. Site may be a little bit slow right now. Yeah, so for example, if I want to look at, let's say, products, what all APIs exist for products, it will show me the API specification. It will talk about the use cases. It will actually give me a user flow as to how I can create products, how I can create product groups. The best part is I can actually try out this API in real time. So I can look at what a request response is. So for example, if I want to try out this post request, I can do that from here as well. Okay. And then you can look at some of the sample responses. So I'll need to fill in some responses here. But that's the idea, that you can actually try out, even if you do not have a sandbox, you can at least try out the APIs here. And then it has a number of other things as well. So if you are just starting out, there are some really nice guides here that you can use. There are also solution kits, which is one of my favorites, which is basically, if you are building a mobile app, what component of Commerce Cloud which you'll use. So it's a kit that Salesforce has published. There is a PDF, and then there is some accompanying source code as well. The idea is that you don't reinvent the wheel every time you need to do something new. So these kits are there, and I actually have a Dreamforce session which I presented last year, and you will be able to find that video. I'll try and share that link as well on chat if I can find it. But the idea is that there are actually pre-built solutions or seed projects for everything, and then you can actually use these as a starting point and then customize these for your needs. Okay, so I think that's one part of it, and then there is another part of it which is called, we call it as the Commerce Cloud Partner Marketplace. It is also called as the Link Marketplace. This is where you would come and see what all other third-party solutions are available if you want to do something specific. So for example, you want to build out a payment gateway integration with, say, Apple Pay or Google Pay or something else. So if you don't really want to implement it yourself, you can actually come here and navigate this site. For example, let me come to payment, and let's see what all options we have in the payment category. Okay, so you will find here a number of solutions. For example, Amazon has published their own cartridge that I can use, and then there are several others as well. Can anyone tell me what would be a equivalent of the Commerce Cloud Marketplace in the Salesforce world? You might be using this very frequently. Should be very obvious as well. App Exchange, yes. Okay, so these are some resources. I will go back to my slides now. So as I said, really difficult exams, but really well worth it if that's a skill you want to develop and that's a career line that you aspire for. Some references, and I'll share this deck as well, so you have these handy. We talked about how the architecture evolved to a mobile first, and now it's an API first architecture. We saw what was the site genesis architecture, which was the legacy architecture. We looked at the SFRA example. Some of the use cases, I did not really cover this in a lot of detail, but the most common use cases, obviously e-commerce for retail, but there are other use cases as well. So for example, the Gatwick Airport in UK, in London, they use Commerce Cloud for parking tickets. There are actually doctors on platforms which are now using Commerce Cloud for payments for e-medicine treatments, which is basically e-consultations as well. So it's now really spread out in terms of, now it's not really restricted just to e-commerce, but there are a lot of verticals it's now spread out to. And then these are some links, B2C Commerce Developer Center, Introduction to Commerce Cloud. This is a video on Salesforce, which gives you a very high level overview. And then on YouTube, you will find a lot of videos from Dreamforce. Some of them are by me, and then a lot of videos from the product team as well, which you can actually use to understand various aspects. With that, I think we can go to questions. And as I said, I also have a small quiz, which if there is interest and if there is time, we can actually do that. So I'll actually hand it off to Sesha. Let me know how we should proceed. And
thank you very much. Yeah, I think there are some questions in the chat window. If you can find some and answer those, it will be better. And guys, you can feel free to ask questions by unmuting yourself. Yeah.
Sure. So let me get through the chat questions first, and
yes,
then if people have other questions. So I think I have the answers. And yeah, thank you to everybody who answered my questions. First question is, any specific reasons why release model is different than the global release model we talked about? Good question. I think I've covered this as well, that Demandware or SFCC has a history of its own. Before it was acquired by Salesforce, they decided on this monthly release model, and then they've decided to continue that. The biggest reason for that is that there are a lot of quick advancements that happen on the Commerce Cloud platform. So just having 3 releases a year, it's not really a scalable model. And I think I mentioned that phrase as well, that's used in e-commerce and mobile development, which is fail early and fail fast. So they really want to get these changes out quickly as possible, rather than wait for these 3 release cycles per year. So, and then this API commerce. So this API first approach, which I mentioned, is another example, which is kind of a mid-release change that they had to make. But if you just stick to that 3 releases a year model, that's not really scalable. Yeah, and somebody answered it. So Karthik answered that. So thank you, Karthik, for that. And Harsh answered. That's a good answer as well. Okay, moving on. I think most of these are answers. What is difference between B2C cloud and marketing cloud in Salesforce? It is an apples versus oranges difference. B2C commerce is an e-commerce platform. Marketing cloud is a platform that you use to send out emails to your end customers and engage them via things like newsletters or transactional emails. What are the license costs for Commerce Cloud? Good question again. It is different from what you are used to in terms of Salesforce or Service Cloud or Sales Cloud. Here, it's based on transactions. So for example, if you are a new customer, you tell the Commerce Cloud team that we want to partner with you and we expect 1 million transactions per month. So what they will do is they will not charge you any licensing cost, but they will actually take a cut out of that revenue. It's typically, it ranges from 0.1 to 0.5%. So they will give you all the infrastructure that you need. But once your storefront is live, based on every sale that you make, there is a percentage that actually goes out to e-commerce cloud team. So it's not really a monthly flat fee kind of a license structure. It is more of a transactional based. Can we have CPQ integrated with B2B commerce cloud and product recommendations from Einstein API? I don't know if you meant to ask B2C or B2B, but regardless, it's possible for both. For B2C, there is a CPQ connector that you can use. And for B2B, again, I think for B2B, it's much simpler because it's actually a native Salesforce package. So you can install the managed package, B2B package, and you can also install CPQ in the same org, and then you can actually use out whatever components you need from CPQ, the price books or whatever you need from CPQ, you can use this. Product recommendation from Einstein AI, that is for B2C. I'm not really aware if that is currently available in B2B. Commerce Cloud will use site.com. No, it's a separate technology. It does not use site.com. B2B commerce does use Community Cloud, but Commerce Cloud in general, it's a completely separate stack. It's all built on JavaScript. It's front end, back end, everything is JavaScript, unlike your Salesforce development. How products and pricing is maintained in B2C? Yeah, so I think I actually forgot to show that. So that's a good question. So let me actually give you a quick walkthrough of how this happens. Thank you for that question. I think I missed that. So when I logged in this sandbox of mine, I just showed you the storefront interface. There is actually, you can see the data model here. Okay, so here, I think the question was, how are products and pricing maintained? So all these products that you saw here, these are actually maintained in a data model. So we have a system object called products, which basically stores all of this information. Okay, so let me select a site because the product catalog or a product detail is always associated with a site. Once I do that, and once I go to products, and if I go to this page and if I click find, this is all the products that I have. So for example, I can actually increase this listing. And these are, for example, just the variants of a single product that you can see. But as I scroll down, you will be able to see more products. As to how this is actually stored, we, again, similar to Salesforce, we have a concept of system objects or standard objects and custom objects. Now, if I want to look at what the structure of the product object is, I can come here I can go to the attribute definitions, and it will actually show me what are all the fields that I have on the product. So some of the fields that I'll expect on the product is whether this product is new, whether this is on sale, what kind of a product it is, what is the price, what is the warranty. And then all these attributes that you see, the ones that you see with a lock symbol, these are all system attributes, which means you cannot actually modify them. Everything else is a custom attribute, similar to custom fields that you have in your objects. And also have a concept of price books in the prices for all the products. So for example, let me look at the USD list price. I can actually see which all price books are associated with which sites. For example, this USD price list is actually associated with both the current sites that I have. And what are the price definitions? So for example, if I want to search for a shirt and I want to look at what the prices for those shirts are within my price book, I will actually need to be very precise. So let me just search for all the prices. So for example, for this particular shirt, I can see that it has a specific product, it has a specific catalog, and then it has certain pricing, which I can actually modify by editing the question was on products and price books, and hopefully I've answered both. Okay, what are the generic integrations for SFCC? Most common integrations are payment, invoicing, order management, inventory management. Do we have hands-on org to practice Commerce Cloud? Yeah, unfortunately, as I said, this is a big problem right now in the Commerce Cloud ecosystem. The only way you can get a hands-on org is if you work for one of the Salesforce partners. If you do that, if you are a part of a Salesforce partner, you can actually go to a partner community, and there is a chatter group called on demand sandboxes. There is that's where you can request a hands-on org. Otherwise, at the moment, there is no way to get a org. The good thing is they do have plans to open those up as on-demand sandboxes, similar to how you can get a free Salesforce developer org, but the ETA or the time frame for that is not known. Does SFCC own any payment gateway and order management? There is a built-in payment gateway and an order management system. You can use that, or you can use third-party ones from the Link Marketplace. Does SFCC integrate with customer support to the related purchases? Yes, there is a Service Cloud connector that you can use, and you can have the case management functionality on your e-commerce site. And if you go to, for example, so this is a site which is like one of the best known examples of B2C commerce. And if you see that this is one of the most popular kids merchandising sites as well, and again one of the big implementations. And somewhere you will see contact us or support, and that is typically the case management functionality or the Service Cloud functionality that's coming in. Okay, anyone can sign up to see the available products, and anyone can sign up. Anyone without sign up can see the available products, any published page. Yeah, so typically that is the guest access that you have. So you can actually restrict what all the guests can see and what is it that the users will only be able to see once they sign up. If I don't have any real-time project to work on, how can I explore and prep for B2C commerce certifications? Yeah, it's, as I said, it's a little bit of a pain point, but a good starting point is the site, B2C commerce developer site. And then I don't want to promote myself, but I also have a course on Pluralsight, which you can actually do. It's free, so I don't really make any money out of it, but it will actually help you understand some more concepts. So the MVC architecture that I've explained. You can actually, I spend a lot of time in this course explaining that. And if you use this try for free option, I think it should give you weak access. There is also this site called SF Play by Play. So there are a lot of these courses on various clouds within Salesforce, which have been done by a lot of experts. And if you click on this link here, get 1 month of Pluralsight free, I think that should give you free access. And again, as I said, it's not just Commerce Cloud. There is a course on CPQ. There is a course on non-profit cloud, marketing cloud, ton of valuable information. And the structure of these courses is this gentleman on the left, Don Robbins. He's one of, again, a Salesforce MVP. He gives an expert scenario to the person on the right, and then he, based on that scenario, he will ask a lot of questions that you as an audience or you as somebody who's learning that product will ask. So I strongly recommend, I mean, not just for commerce, but if it's a free resource, please make good use of this resource. Can we change the price books or product attributes based on end user geolocation? Yes, that is possible. I can actually show you. So you can actually do a lot of things. I can actually make the product online or offline. I can actually change how that product would look like to specific groups of users or based on certain geography. That is all possible, and that is all possible by the business manager interface. Can we have some AI-based intelligent pricing? Yes, that is possible using the Commerce Cloud Einstein. You can actually do it on the site itself, or you can also do it based on categories. So for example, you can do it for a specific catalog. So for example, I can do it for this whole catalog, which covers all these categories, or I can actually drill down and then I can apply those rules on a specific category. So for example, I can apply that on the men's accessories as well. Okay. Can we easily update inventory by integrating with warehouses and sales in real time? Yes, you can do that. Like we have Flipkart Seller Central. Yes, you can do that. So the way you do that is through cartridges, which are actually published on the Link Marketplace, or the other way is you can use the Okapi interface, use the REST API, and then you can build a real-time integration. Is there any possibility we can maintain different price tags for different sale events? Yes, you can do that. One of the ways you can do that is, so for example, I'll not get into the specifics, but so for example, for Amazon, a good way to look at it is if you are an Amazon Prime customer, you can see certain other benefits which a non-Prime customer does not see. So for example, you see free shipping. You also see a lot of subscription discounts. So for example, rather than a one-time purchase, if you buy that product for on a subscription, a monthly basis, you get an additional 5% discount. And I think they are launching another sale, which is Prime Days coming soon. So again, at that time, you get a lot of subscription discount. So I can actually view a site as a big spender, like an Amazon Prime customer. I can view it as a guest user, a registered user, and unregistered user. And you can, as a developer, you can actually configure the site in a way that it will actually show different information for all these different target user segments. So all of that is possible here as well. And as Darshana rightly pointed out, multi-currency price books are available as well. So for example, if I build a product, so for example, as I mentioned, Adidas is a big customer. So if I have a site for Adidas in, say, for example, France, adidas.fr, it would list everything in French, even the currencies. And if I have Adidas China, no, not really China, it's a bad example because of COVID. Adidas India, adidas.in, then we can have everything listed in the INR currency. So that is possible as well. I think I have covered all the questions. You can create more customer groups. Yes, that is possible as well. You can create. So there is a lot of flexibility that this particular platform offers. So you can create your own customer groups as well. And a lot of it is actually point and click configuration. So pretty much every option that you see here is all point and click configuration. Again, this does contain some developer settings, but almost all the configuration that you do can be done here from point and click as well. Can we give user discounts based on wallet bank? Yes, that is possible as well. So you can actually configure your payment methods. So there are payment processors and payment methods that you can configure, and you can basically create discounts based on that. Is the transaction volume handling elastic? Yes, it is completely scalable. The reason for that is that, as I said, the licensing model of Commerce Cloud is that you actually do not pay based on a specific license. Commerce Cloud actually charges you based on transactions. So the more transactions that your site has, Salesforce also benefits the more. So it's completely scalable. On-demand scalability is available. Is the any limit like governor limits? Yes. So there are limits like governor limits. Again, the idea is that you can only create a certain number of custom objects. You can only do you can only create a certain number of groups and things like that. The objective is very similar to what it is in Salesforce, to encourage you to be a better developer. And since it's a multi-tenant architecture, that you don't really hog all the resources that are meant for other users as well. So that is possible as well. So thank you once again for everybody who stuck around, and I hope you learned.
Have you once again in this session, and thank you for having us, and thank you for staying for this much long. Yeah.